We're still not done with chapter 14. There's a lot of very interesting stuff over there. In particular, connection between the social justice and economic justice, and hopefully now we can use all the theory and everything to talk about them together and to understand how it relates to us as we live in this crazy world. So social justice. Roots are in natural law tradition. Remember natural law tradition? Thomas Aquinas was the good example, representative of that. It generally based on the fact that certain rights are not just given, they are inherent to all the human beings, either for religious reasons or some other reasons. Even if you are not necessarily religious, as we saw with Hegel, you can still believe that there are some inherent rights with the spirit, as he called it, simply because that is in itself something divine. Now, the utilitarianism, remember utilitarianism has slightly a difficult position here, because what was the most characteristic about utilitarianism? Yeah.
Focuses on happiness for the most amount of people.
Exactly, to maximize happiness. But at the same time, Mill was also very wary of possibility of losing freedom. His famous work on liberty specifically discusses that, and he goes into great detail about how the autonomy, the personal autonomy of people, their personal freedom, should not be suppressed. So how do you maximize happiness of everybody and yet not suppress individual happiness? That's a delicate balance, and we will talk more about it today, because obviously that's one of the most difficult problems in society, to make everyone happy as they can be without actually taking away individual happiness. Now, one of the most important issues with social justice is a question of equality. First thing we need to do is to distinguish two different types of equality. Frequently people do not do that, and that creates a lot of confusion. They don't know what they are talking about, and they are arguing over different issues. So substantive and equality of opportunity. Substantive equality. Individuals should have exactly the same access and amount of substantive goods. That basically means take everything and divide it equally, right? Whether or not that's a good idea, many people do not think so. It seems to be overly simplistic. But there's a different question of equality of opportunity. Equal chance, equal starting point. When you have Olympic Games, you don't have athletes starting the marathon 15 minutes early, some athletes, right? And others are joining them later from behind. That would not be a fair game. Similarly in society, and we already brushed on that subject many times, and of course these two are not the same thing. One doesn't necessarily entail the other. You can say people should have equal chance at life, and then once the outcomes are different, so be it. Of course, not everybody agrees even with that. Some people are saying, well, the outcomes, as we will see today, still have to be equalized at least to some degree, either completely or partially, because even that fair competition may end up being somewhat unfair to certain of us for different reasons. And again, Mill was wary of that. Utilitarians do have this problem of balancing equality and liberty. The ontology emphasizes dignity and respect for autonomy. You would think the ontology, and traditionally the ontology is usually looked at from a more libertarian point of view. Respecting autonomy of people means not imposing on them any artificial restraints. However, even Kant recognized that there are things we need to do for the society. You cannot just concentrate on autonomy alone. For example, he thought that charity is our duty. It is one of the duties we have. We need to do our best to equalize society because of a very different outcomes, and governments also are entitled, according to Kant, to tax wealthy people to support those in need. During the time of Kant, 18th century, those inequalities were way more pronounced than they are today. Governments, for the most part, didn't do anything to help the poor people. And there were extreme cases of poverty where people were literally starving to death and lived in absolutely horrible conditions. So even Kant recognized that this is not ideal outcome, and you cannot just claim autonomy and say, well, we're all responsible for where we are. Now, libertarians, of course, object to any attempt of redistribution of wealth and income. John Locke, who is considered the classical example of a liberal, thought that we have a natural right to property, that the property is natural right. His idea of property was as long as you put your labor into something, it is your property. But obviously, that's more complicated than that in the real world, because what if this is property you get from your parents? You didn't put anything into them, but they did, or your grandparents, or somebody at some point, and so on. Now, charity versus justice. So charity is a libertarian, in libertarian context, is not something which is required. It is optional, right? Charity could be engaged in or not. If it is obligatory, it's no longer charity. Justice, on the other hand, is not optional. So charity is, the term is supererogatory, which means actions that go above and beyond the call of duty. There is our duty, and there is something in addition to that, which is not really our duty, but a nice thing to do. Okay, now efficiency versus justice. This is the one very interesting question, because is justice efficient? And is efficiency most important thing, or the justice most important? I do talk about this in Philosophy 102 as well. So this is the interesting question. You can think of two countries, right? Two countries, one of them may have a bigger GDP. What is GDP? Do you know? It's a value of goods and services. Yeah, actually, whatever is export and import is kind of deducted from that, because they want to make sure that this is what is produced and stays in the country. So bigger GDP, of course, any economist will tell you is better, right? Because what does bigger GDP mean? More goods. It's an economic pie. You can think about economic pie. The bigger the pie, the better. And mainstream economics definitely would just tell you bigger GDP is better. But let's look at this situation in a little more detail. So the split could be like this. In this society, the country, well, A. In country A, 5% of population controls 90% of its wealth. And 95% control the remaining 10%. While in this country, it is 50-50. So 5% control half, and 95% control the other half. Well, now, question, which one is better? This one? Well, obviously, first of all, the first question you should ask yourself then, am I 5% or am I 95%? If you are 5% of the wealthiest, that certainly is the much better pie for you, isn't it? Your chunk is so much bigger. Now, as if you are 95%, which 95% of us are, then you may think this is actually better. Because look at the chunk of the pie here and look at it here. That's hell a lot more. Now, of course, the argument frequently made is that if we strive for this, our pie will be smaller, and then it may get even smaller. And then like basically everybody loses. Whereas if we let the market forces go free, the pie goes so big that even 95% still gets their chunk bigger. Whether that actually is happening or not is a different question. So this would be one of the most important questions, the question of distributive justice, the distribution of wealth. And again, there's two different types of that distribution: process distributive justice or procedural justice. Means economic distribution is just if the process in which it comes about is just, right? So I can give you an example with when I prepare a course, right? I decide what percentage of the grade should depend on what assignments. I set it on a syllabus, and then I run the course for the first time. So if I go with the procedural justice, I can say, okay, that's the rules. Let the chips may fall where they may. If some students fail, they fail. If some students do well, they do well. But then, of course, when I'm assigning final grades, the situation may very well be that I discover the class average is like D- or something, right? Almost everybody fails it. And at that point, I may think about different type of justice, which is end state justice, right? And I may ask myself, okay, I set the rules were fair, but the results, I don't know. It doesn't seem like the results are that great. Should I curve it? Well, if I curve it, I'd be going with the end state distributive justice, which means that the end result determines whether it is just, not the process, right? So these are the two different approaches. They can be combined in a way, like I said. But in the end of the day, you should ask yourself, do I care about the end state? Do I care about where do we end up with this process? Or, as long as the process itself is just, it's fine. So the same thing with society, right? If you set up the rules of the game, the laws in a country, the constitution, and as a result of that, those 5% get the ginormous chunk, so be it. You can say that is just how the chips fell. Or, just like I sometimes do, you may ask yourself, okay, it seems to be going the wrong way here. I did set up the rules are fair, but I don't really like how it's coming up. So how about I curve it a little bit and set up, for example, the average grade as a C, and then give the students grades accordingly, even though they don't have enough points according to the syllabus, right? And of course, most of you guys would probably hopefully agree that the second approach is better, right? Because sometimes it does seem, especially if you teach the course for the first time, that you made it too difficult, that the way you set up the exams are too challenging for students. And ideally, average students should get a C. If average student is failing the course, something is going wrong here. You do want to then readjust it. And that is the same question with society. Because the rules in the society are set by who? By us, by the people. Especially in a democracy, and hopefully we do still live in a democracy. And in that case, we do care about end state as well as the process. To say the process is fair, so whatever happened, like we have all the money, 3 billionaires have now all the money, everybody else is poor, but the rules were fair, so what can we do? No, you can still change the curve. You can still do something about that. So just some approaches to this, of course, are different, because not everybody agrees ever in the society. So let's take a look at some political and economic theories associated with different approaches. First one is libertarian. Libertarianism. Do you guys know who is in Congress now, who's, I think, the only libertarian? Ron Paul. Yeah, that's the guy who is kind of conservative, but not. He votes against Trump many times, and part of the reason is he also is against government running big budget deficit. Generally, libertarians are against government. The least government, the better. Their idea is government should not interfere with your life at all, but if it has to, at the very minimal level. Just make sure that we are free. Make sure we don't interfere with each other's rights, don't take away from each other. So liberty, basic right to non-interference from the government and from the other people. If a person is free and as a result, he or she ruins their own life, so be it. They decided to ruin it. Don't stop them. Government has the minimal role. Even libertarians agree that, well, government at least should do a little bit, but as little as possible. Guarantee liberty, and that's it. No other approach. So that is the process view of distributive justice, right? The process should be fair. If the process is fair and 99% of people are poor, end up poor, and 1% is the rich, so be it. As long as the process is fair, everyone is in control of their own destiny. Now, that, of course, frequently is associated with capitalism, right? Capitalism, economic system in which individuals or corporations own and control much or most of the country's capital. Even if you take economics course, they'll tell you right away there's no pure capitalism country system. No country has pure capitalism. There is always at least some elements of government control over economy and so on. Many, many examples. Natural monopolies would be one of them. I don't know if you guys know about that. Natural monopoly would be like the gas or water, right? Because how can you possibly have a competition for this natural resource which you have a pipe going into your house delivery, right? It's pretty difficult. If you have one company which produces like what is it, Nevada? Yeah. Do you want another one? It's a huge investment, right? It's difficult to have two companies, and in fact, it will be not as efficient from economic point of view. But if you have one company, you always have a danger of monopoly. They can set any price they want because they are the only ones who provide this resource. And so then the government has to interfere. In Nevada in particular, government actually controls the price they can set. They must apply to raise the price, and the government, Nevada state government, has the right to refuse that or restrict that because otherwise, like bad things can happen. There's an interesting example in California when they deregulated their power. I don't know, have you guys heard about it? It was quite a few years ago, but there was that moment in history, and what happened? Huge shortages. Huge. They basically, parts of California constantly had power disruption. So that is not a great way to go. Sometimes this is what is known as laissez-faire in economics. Let them be. Let them do whatever they want. And many economists indeed think that this is how things should be. But once you start studying economics, you start realizing, no, there are many situations when just leaving the economic forces unchecked can produce a very, very bad outcomes. You can have monopolies, you can have those oil barons like they did at the beginning of the 20th century, controlling the market and basically squeezing the consumers to the point of insanity, destroying the competition artificially, not through fair competition, but through dumping the prices and then running everybody out of business, and then they monopolize the market. So that is one of huge dangers with capitalism. And of course, there are many critiques. Now let's think about it, another little discussion. So economist Milton Friedman, who actually is a big proponent of this libertarian economics, argues that businesses should not focus on ethics, but make the most money possible. That's what the business is there for, just make money. What do you think? Do you think companies are responsible for conducting business ethically?
For money.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Like, I mean, obviously, if you are after profit, why would you want to install some stuff to help the environment? It seems like that's counterproductive. In fact, there's another interesting thing not many people are talking about. The manufacturing went to China, right? Part of the reason they went to China is cheap labor. Another reason is the environmental protections. Believe it or not, China has very few. When they had Olympics, which was just a few years ago, they had to stop all the factories around Beijing for like 2 months, because when they were running, you could not breathe there. People were wearing masks without any pandemic just because there was no air to breathe. That's how insane it was. They actually, by law, required all the factories around Beijing to stop production for several months, just so that these athletes, when they would be running and jumping and so on, wouldn't die because the air was horrible. Do we want that? I mean, yeah, we can get sneakers a little bit cheaper, but as a result of that, we get cancer and heart disease, and you can't even breathe without a mask. I think we may not want that. But yeah, that obviously makes production cheaper, because all those environmental filters and whatever stuff, it costs money, it slows them down. It's so much easier to just take this waste and dump it into the nearest river and just let it flow away happily. But of course, that is not good for us. For all of us, including people who work at these factories, right? So that's one of the problems. Then, like, how is this stuff produced? Do you guys care? Like, have you heard that some of it is made in the factories where they have slave labor, child labor, right? Would you buy something if it's cheaper but made with this type of production? Yeah, obviously, sometimes we're just not aware of it because they try not to tell us. You have to investigate. Nobody's going to say, hey, proudly made by the children nimbly fingers. No, they will hide it as much as they can. But this is the truth about most of those factories. The conditions there are pretty horrible. Again, I read stories even about the ones which use grown-up labor in China. They are pretty bad because they rely mostly on the people who come from the countryside, the peasants and so on. So they accommodate them in dorms, like 10 people per room or something, and pay them very low wages. Yeah. And that's how they make the cheap product. And that's also like, if you want to bring it back here, well, one way is to just, bring back these kinds of conditions, and then it'll be nice and cheap. But you'll be like making $1 an hour and working 18 hours a day, and like live in a dorm. That is not something we want. But if we want to bring it back here and pay people decent wages and set it up so that it would be environmentally friendly and everything, which of course we do want, well, then the products will be very expensive. And that's another kind of side of it, because there's no way to make Nikes for $100 if you follow all these procedures and pay decent wages. There's just no way. That will increase the cost of production. And like it's not even about the money. You can call it whatever you want. You can then set up either low wages and low prices, or high wages and high prices. But either way, it will equalize to the point that it will be very expensive. Okay, anyway, now socialism. Socialism, of course, is considered to be the bad word, and so many people are, oh, he must be socialist. What exactly is a socialist? The economy should be deliberately structured under socialism so that the results benefit most people. In that way, it is similar to utilitarianism, right? The idea is to make most happiness for most people. So if most people, like these two examples, we can see right away where most people are happier. Under which system? Right, this one, clearly, because 95%, that's most people. And look at the size of their pie here. We can see it like you don't need to do any numbers. Just from the look of it, this chunk is so much smaller than this one. And 5%, yeah, they are doing better here, but that's only 5%, 1 on 20 people. Whereas majority actually are not as happy, right? Which is why indeed Mill actually, especially towards the end of his life, was leaning towards socialism. Socialism often involves some degree of public management and ownership of goods and services such as education, healthcare, and utilities. Now, the one thing though, there's socialism and socialism. When people say that, they like to bring examples such as what? Like when people say, oh, you want socialism, what countries do they usually mention? We have talked about it before, but just to repeat that because that's very relevant here. Countries like what? North Korea, right? North Korea, and Cuba, and Venezuela. So that would be one extreme. Of course, on the other extreme of like the most capitalist country in the world today, we would see what? United States of America. That's the most capitalist country, as we will see with some other examples. But is there anything in between? Is this just the two possibilities? Yeah, exactly. It's a scale, right? You can get a little bit in that direction, like let's call it pure socialism. And this is pure capitalism. But in between, you would have many varieties. Like you can have some system like United Kingdom, UK. They have free medical care, completely free medical care. Is that socialism? When you suggest it here, people would yell at you. Well, some people would yell at you that you are socialist. Well, I don't think United Kingdom is a socialist country, is it? It's certainly not North Korea. In some ways, they're more democratic than we are. At least they were able to remove their prime minister in 2 weeks after she suggested something crazy. So that's, but they still charge students for higher education, even though they actually set a limit to how much it is. There's 9,500 pounds is the most you pay per year in tuition. No university can charge you more. That is the limit, unless you're a foreign student. In that case, they can charge you whatever they want. But if you are a British student, what they call home student, that's the maximum. But there are countries which have free medical care and free education. Countries such as Sweden, Denmark, the Scandinavian countries. And there are several others. Is that socialism? Well, it's clearly closer to socialism than this country. They have free medical care and free education for all. But they still are democratic countries. They obviously have democracy. They have capitalism because they have free enterprise. They also have some corporations and rich people. They have very rich people, not as rich as we do with Bezos and so on, having like bazillion dollars, but they have rich people. So there is obviously the scale. And you can, of course, always find countries which are somewhat, to some degree, socialist, but not completely. The typical critique socialists have against capitalism is this. Capitalism has unpredictable business cycles. There is constant business cycle. Again, they teach you this in economics. And one of the big things in economics is to, how do you predict the recession coming? We know they are coming. There are cycles, right? If you look at the history, the GDP, like always, expands, and then contracts. Expands, and then contracts. And when it contracts, what does it mean? It's not just that the pie is going smaller. People losing their jobs. That's what is happening. People losing their jobs, they're losing their livelihood. And of course, if you live in Sweden or Denmark, you'd probably get like pretty good welfare in that case. They have a social net which provides for the poorest to not go completely broke. But if you live in the United States and you end up on the street, you're on the street. Nobody cares. There may be some charities that can help you, but it's pretty hard to get help from those charities. Few people can, and of course that is a lot more difficult for people. And it's inevitable with capitalism. We were kind of lucky lately, although the last time we had this big recession, the housing crisis, that You guys may not remember, I remember it very well, but the biggest one in the United States was the Great Depression during the 1930s. Started like 1929, I think, and it lasted for like 10 years. Now that's completely horrible. If you Google it, you'll see that is just absolutely devastating. People could not find job. Unemployment was, I think, like 25% or something. Almost nobody had a job. And nobody was hiring because businesses also couldn't make profit. They couldn't make any money. And that's actually when the government started here also become more socialist, because the government realized that we need to help these people. We need to do something there. And many of the systems we now have, like Medicare, Medicaid, started around that time because the conversation started that at least something should be done. It also could produce bad end state results. Capitalism, right? So that's some of the criticisms. Are you really free if you have no home, if you're hungry, if you have no education, if you're poor? Even if government doesn't interfere with you, it doesn't seem like you are that free to do what you want. Because yeah, you can travel, but you don't have money for the tickets. You can publish a book, but you don't have money to pay for the publisher. You have no money for anything. So obviously that constrains your freedom too. Now, are there dangers with socialism? Does this system always work? Not as great as you would think. And I am a living example of that, because I told you guys I grew up in Soviet Union. I was born in, believe it or not, 1968. The Soviet Union broke up in 1991. I was 23. I lived through this whole thing there, and I was right there. And I remember the way it was before Gorbachev started his changes. I remember the time under Brezhnev even. It was like real communist times. Well, many things which people now think are great were actually present there, and some of them worked, some of them didn't. I told you about medical care. That was actually pretty good. But one of the things I can mention which was pretty bad is housing. Why? Why was housing so bad? Well, in order to give people places to live, you actually need to build them, right? You need to have a lot of buildings with apartments, never mind houses, and that takes resources. There's no way around it. You may want to give people housing, but unless you have resources to do it, you are not going to be able to do it. And the situation was really bad. On one hand, there was no rent, right? The government was providing housing. You were entitled. The limit, though, for them to provide you housing was 12 square meters per person when I grew up. 12 square meters is about 120 square feet. That's how much space you're entitled to. So basically, to say it simply, say one-bedroom apartment around 400 square feet, according to the government, if 3 people live there, you're not entitled to anything else. That's the maximum. If you have 4 people there, you could apply to get something better, right? But if not, if you are a single young individual, and I knew people like this, the government would give you a room in a shared apartment. That's all you're entitled to. You could only apply for something better once you get married. There's 2 of you and a child. Then you could apply and they would maybe give you 1 bedroom for 3 people. Right? So keep that in mind. Like nobody was entitled to have an apartment right away. And another problem with it, when the government gives you this apartment, do they give it to you where you want it to be? Oh no. Oh no. You are just lucky to have anything. People were in line for 5-10 years. And after 5-10 years, the government tells you, okay, this is the apartment. If it's in a bad neighborhood, who cares? They're not going to offer you a second one. If you don't take this one, bye-bye. Live where you are, right? You could not choose the floor, the layout, nothing. There's no choice at all. This is the apartment. Be lucky to take it. So in terms of like flexibility, that also was extremely inflexible. Why? Well, they wanted to do their best, but there's only so much they could do. They were building those buildings, but the population was growing too. People having children, people have bigger families, right? So as soon as they give an apartment to a family, the child grows up, gets married, has his own children. Again, they have several families living together. So there was really no way to get out of it. Several communist leaders were trying to somehow break out of this thing. They could not. In general, this lack of control was very, very unpleasant. And part of the explanation was, oh, that's for your own good. We are taking care of you, right? We don't want you to be confused by all those bad capitalists when you go abroad, so don't go abroad. We're not going to let you leave the country. We don't want you to start saying things which will confuse other people, so we'll control what you can say. Because again, that's for your own good. Otherwise, we'll have to put you in jail. So this constant control was also way too extreme. And in terms of distribution, right, the idea was the government decides what is the ideal amount of everything being produced, because there were no private businesses. So the government would literally decide how many shoes do we need to produce, how many pairs of underwear, and so on. Now that is very, very problematic, as turned out. And they discovered it immediately. The first thing which happened shortly after the revolution, huge bureaucracy, because you need people to decide all that. So you need whole ministries just sitting there and calculating how many pairs of shoes do we need to produce for the people and how. Because if you decide, okay, we need to produce, 100 million pairs of shoes, you need to build factories for that, you need supply lines. Under capitalism, this is more or less spontaneous process, which also has problems, but it works better. Under socialism, what they were trying to do is literally micromanage the entire thing, so they'd be like 10 bureaucrats deciding how to make those shoes. And of course, the last thing they cared about is, are these shoes actually comfortable? Do they even look good? Just let's do something so that people have something to put on their feet. And then, yeah, there were products in store. You go into the store, you have these cheap shoes, which are horrible looking, very uncomfortable, but they are there. And everybody was, as a result, going to the black market and buying shoes which are imported or brought from other countries. And of course, there weren't that many of them, but they were very expensive. Just to give you an idea of the prices on the black market. So Nike is like this, and this is actually a 1984 remake. Would be around 200 rubles, which is more than a worker was making in a month. The worker average monthly salary was 180 rubles. Nike is like this, it would be 200. So you can imagine how few people could afford them. Yeah, some people had money. How did some people have money? Well, one way would be if you actually are involved in some distribution of rare goods, right? You could sell them on the black market, make money. The government could catch you, put you in jail, but until then, you would be doing pretty well. There were some other people who, for example, had the ability to travel, like the sailors could go to foreign countries, bring something back from foreign country, like a pair of sneakers, sell them on the black market, make good money. But majority of people were, of course, living pretty badly. So yeah, that you don't want too much of this stuff either. That can work pretty badly. And then remember that communism, which Marx was talking about. But as we already discussed it last time, Marx was very careful not to go into the detail. And that's the whole thing, like the devil's in the detail, right? What exactly is communism? According to Marx, it's this wonderful society which will then happen. But how exactly this society will work, nobody knows. I guess we can indeed assume that there is a possibility of achieving something better eventually. But it's pretty hard to build something if you don't know what it is. So from that point of view, again, during my childhood, there was a Communist Party which supposedly was building communism. But even back then, if you ask them point blank, what exactly is a communism, they had nothing to tell you. Because they didn't know themselves. At most, they could repeat what is in Marx, such as from everyone according to his abilities to everyone according to his needs. And that can be very loaded way to put it. Like, what are our needs? Do we actually need a separate house to live in, or a room in a dorm is good enough for our needs as long as there is a roof over your head, right? Do you need more than one pair of shoes? Doesn't seem like you do. So would that communism then entail like one pair of shoes and like a dorm room? I don't really want to live like this. that is the problem, right? Marx was very, very vague about it. Now, in terms of rights, so negative and positive rights, we saw it in Hegel already in terms of negative and positive freedom. Same idea. Negative rights would be just rights not to, for something not to happen to you. Right not to be harmed in some way is negative. Right not to have liberty interfered with is negative. Libertarianism is all about negative rights. They think that the government should provide you with negative rights, as in nobody should interfere with you. On the other hand, positive rights would be something like an entitlement type thing, right? Right to be helped when help is needed. Right for basic economic subsistence. It is indeed frequently associated with a socialism, because socialism talks about things like right for housing, right for medical care, and so on. Now, perhaps one of the most balanced systems we can talk about is modern liberalism. It combines libertarianism, capitalism, and socialism. John Rawls is the philosopher most closely associated with it. He had some very interesting ideas. Books talks about them in detail, so let's talk about it a little bit. Both positive and negative rights, right? So to avoid this kind of extremes, which we got under socialism and the Soviet Union, you have a right to, first of all, express yourself if you feel something is not right in a society without censorship. You should have a negative right in the sense of government shouldn't hold you back if you want to leave the country or travel. But at the same time, some positive rights, at least to make sure that society avoids extreme poverty, at least make sure that nobody lives on the street. They may not give everybody a 3-bedroom house, but at the very least, perhaps to make sure that the most extreme cases are taken care of, right? So that is a nice table from the book describing the 3 systems: socialism, libertarianism as 2 kind of extreme positions. Libertarianism, remember, is associated indeed with capitalism, and liberalism in between. So the thesis of socialism is equality is a primary value. The most important thing is equality. On the other hand, for libertarianism, liberty is a primary value. The most important thing is to have freedom. But liberalism says liberty and equality are values that ought to be balanced. So you need both. You can't just go with equality at the cost of liberty. You cannot go with liberty at the cost of equality. And then, of course, that entails certain connection to certain moral theories. For example, with socialism, we see utilitarian concern for greatest happiness for greatest number, natural law as a concern for social justice, focus on positive rights, and libertarianism, autonomy is the key issue. But for liberalism, ideal social contract under a veil of ignorance. We'll talk about John Rawls' veil of ignorance in a second. It is an interesting idea. So John Rawls wrote his most famous work in 1971, A Theory of Justice. Justice is the first virtue of social institutions. Not efficiency, but justice. He thought justice is something we all should be concerned with in the first place. Just like truth is the virtue of science. In science, you must be concerned with truth. And in social institutions, in society, you must be concerned with justice. So this is what he proposed. Unfortunately, we as human beings are selfish, right? And we all kind of like to pull this blanket towards ourselves. And the other unfortunate thing is we already are in this world. We already are either male or female, certain age, certain skin color, and so on. So he proposed the following experiment. Imagine that you are not born yet. You are not born yet, and you don't know who you will be. You could be a man or a woman, black or white, any kind of body type, any kind of nationality. How would you set up the rules in the world in which you want to be born? That's the veil of ignorance, right? You are ignorant of your current situation. You don't know who you are. Would you want, for example, to be born into the world which has racism? But what if you will be born black? That's a possibility. Would you want to be born into a society which is male-dominated? What if you're going to be born a woman? Right? So that's the approach. It is difficult for most people, again, because we already are here, right? We already are male or female, black or white. But if we actually want to be fair, that's how we should set up the society. We should think about it in this way. Try to distance from your actual circumstances and look at it broadly. He called it the original position. What would rational individuals agree on if they came together to form society for their mutual benefit? So he thinks that people in the original position behind this veil of ignorance would agree on at least two principles of justice. Number one, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with similar system of liberty for all. So do not interfere with anybody's freedoms, just like libertarians actually were saying. No, it's no longer there. Libertarian system. But also social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged. Why should we care about the least advantaged? Because we don't know who we're going to be under this experiment, right? You may be the least advantaged. So of course you'd want to take care of this least advantaged first. And then once you have done that, everybody indeed should have an equal opportunity. The biggest problem we've mentioned many times, and even Plato, remember, in the Republic was trying to address, people are born into a particular circumstances. You already have parents, you already have certain family position and so on. And it's so easy if you're born, for example, a child of billionaires, then start talking about, oh yeah, each person decides their destiny. I made it, why can't you make it? My daddy only gave me $1 million to start. I mean, right? Why can't you make it? And then other people saying, because I was born in a ghetto and my parents are drug addicts. You idiot. Obviously, I couldn't just start my own business like that. So that is the problem to be avoided. You should not have people who are disadvantaged from birth. When people are born, they are not guilty of who they are. We don't choose the family. We don't choose who we are at all. And so, yeah, at the minimum, give people equal opportunity. Once they start working, yeah, some people work harder than others. Some people do indeed are smarter, more capable, and so on. In that case, they deserve a bigger share. How much bigger, that also can be, of course, argued, but that's the minimum. So let's take a look at it from this point of view. 3 societies. Let's see, which one do you guys prefer? In this society, the high income is $200,000 a year. The medium income, which most people have, right, 70,000. But there is also people on low income with 15,000. In this society, the high income is not as high, 70,000. The medium is 40,000. But the low is much higher than this low, 30,000. And in this society, everybody gets 20,000, so basically the entire population has the same income. Which one would you prefer, A, B, or C? Now, it's pretty hard to make a case for C, right? Especially the way they put it. By the way, you could make it more interesting. You can say, how about society C has 30,000 here? Everybody makes 30,000, just like under society B, the low income. Or better yet, how about 40,000? If everybody makes 40,000, which is a medium income here anyway, is this society then better than this? Well, it could be argued, right, both ways. Some people would say it is. Like, here medium is 40, here medium is 40, but nobody makes less than 40, nobody makes more than 40. Well, of course, again, for our personal actualization, just like Hegel was saying, and even Marx, we do want to achieve something more. Marx actually was thinking that we shouldn't even pay money. The money should be getting rid of. By the way, just like Plato. Remember in Plato's Republic, for the guardians at least, there was common property. Because once you start introducing property, you start getting this. And then Plato thought that leads some people to be entrenched with it. There is an obvious problem with like everybody in America. One of the things everybody kind of why people like the system, everybody thinks they can be rich. And that's literally like American dream. People think I will start from nothing and I'll make myself into a millionaire. So for this reason, people are kind of more understanding of the rich, of billionaires. They think, yeah, I'm not a billionaire, but I could be. So I want the system to let me have this opportunity. And it's a different question whether you really can be, right? Because there is some statistics on the subject of how easy it is to become a millionaire in this country, and the unfortunate result is it's actually not easy. For the most part, people who have money are people who have parents who have money. It is quite rare for somebody to literally, it's not impossible, but it is very rare for somebody to start from nothing and make yourself into a wealthy person. It happens, but rarely. For the most part, obviously, if you're born into a wealthy family, all you need to do not to become poor is just to maintain it. At least don't be too stupid. Don't waste all this money. That's the maximum you need to do. But for the poor person to make it there, that is very difficult. Also, it was relatively easier back in the Wild West days, right, when people could just dig gold or something. Nowadays, you can't dig gold. There's only so many things you can do, and even if you are reasonably successful, you're not going to be that successful. So that's why. But nonetheless, there's, I guess, still an argument to be made that you do want to give people indeed this opportunity. However, how low is the low? That's another question. Like here they are saying low income 15,000. Well, I don't know. If it's 15,000, maybe it's not that bad. But there's obviously people in this country who have literally nothing, who live on the street, have no income at all. And whether or not that is an ideal situation, that is a big question. Now, John Rawls, remember, he's what you may say modern liberal. There is slightly different type of liberalism, which also is confusingly enough called liberalism, communitarian liberalism. Communitarians do disagree with him. What exactly is their criticism of this liberalism of John Rawls? They are saying it is too individualistic. It still is, puts it all on an individual. Remember, just like Kant was doing it. But do we live as individuals? That's why we talked about Aristotle and Hegel. Remember, for Aristotle, he said that you live and thrive in a city, in a polis. And similarly, Hegel was saying that the state is what makes you actually free. They do have some point, not as a communitarian point, you still are always part of the community. And you should care about this community too. You cannot just think about it about yourself alone, as if you are the only person in the world, because you're not. At the very least, you have family, right? You have people who are closest to you. You have friends. So you can't help but care about them, and you should care about them, because indeed you cannot be happy if these people are unhappy. If everybody around you is unhappy, it will affect you. We're part of this social network of connections which we can't possibly live without. So communitarians are saying that has to be incorporated into this system. You can't just make it that kind of let's just set the rules and then the best man wins type of thing. You have to keep in mind that communities are not just extremely important, they are the most important thing. So they reject individualism because it doesn't consider that we're already embedded in a family care structures and not just individuals. People belong to communities. They emphasize concrete social relations instead of abstract principles of distributive justice. Couple of quotes. So this is from the Responsive Communitarian Platform. At the heart of the communitarian understanding of social justice is the idea of reciprocity. Each member of the community owes something to all the rest, and community owes something to each of its members. Justice requires responsible individuals in a responsible community. Now here's something one of the members was also saying, another good quote from the book. If some members of the community are increasingly distant from the standard of living of most other members, they will lose contact with the rest of the community. The more those in charge of private and public institutions lead lives of hyper-affluence, the less in touch they are with other community members. Right? So again, thinking about those billionaires who don't even understand how normal people live anymore because they never lived like this. But just today I read in the news there's some story about Donald Trump not knowing what corner store is. He thought that there was no such thing. He didn't understand. Well, I bet he doesn't. Does he ever go shopping? Did he ever go shopping in his life? I doubt it, because his father was already one of the wealthiest people in New York City when he was born. So this is not even, they simply can't understand how normal people live. So to them, certain things may seem like normal when in fact nobody else thinks of it as normal. And that is the problem, right? That should be avoided, because that can create very dangerous situations, especially when you have people like this in charge. They make decisions for everybody, for all of us, for 350 million Americans. But if they don't know what these people actually experience in their life, then those decisions would not be the best decisions. Some examples, just to finish it up. Wage and wage gaps. So wealth is what you own, right? Bank account, investment, property. Wage is what you earn from work. Net worth is when you subtract what you owe from what you own. Some numbers in 2020 in this country, we got 580,000 people who were homeless. At the same time, Elon Musk in 22 was worth $219 billion. I think it's a lot more than that now. Jeff Bezos, $171 billion. Bill Gates, $129 billion. Warren Buffett, $118 billion. The four people hold most of the wealth in the United States, more than the other 300-something million people. Can you imagine that? That seems completely insane. The rich get richer. Why? Well, they have all those stock, right? And the stock goes up. They don't even have to do anything. You know, even if you saved some money, you put it in a bank, you can get like, what, 4% now, right? If you have $1 million, that means $40,000 a year. You get in them for nothing. You don't even have to do any business. Just put it in a bank. How about if you have $100 billion? How much money you're going to be making, again, by not doing a single thing? And yeah, you'll be getting richer and richer because you can't even spend this much money. It's way too much money. They keep on streaming. Bezos's wife decided to start charity and gave away like $30 billion. And while she gave them away, the stock went up, and now she owes even more than she did before that. So she couldn't even reduce her wealth by giving $30 billion. That is the problem. Not everybody is even giving away. At least she did. And unfortunately, economic inequality in this country does align with racial differences. 8.2% of white non-Latinx people lived in poverty in 2020, 19.5% of black people. Same with gender differences. Women earn only 83% of what men earn. Those are real things. The statistics doesn't lie about it. They show that there are definitely problems in this area which have to be addressed. Capitalism sees these inequalities as natural outcomes of the market. Like, we set the rules. If people can't make it, then they can't make it. Too bad. Socialists, of course, want to foster more equitable distribution, not content with inequalities we have discussed. There are many problems with implementing these plans, especially in this country. Like, you know, the Mandani won in New York City on the socialist program. Of course, people voted for him because there are real problems there. This is so expensive. This is the most expensive city on earth. The rents there are crazy. How do people survive there is crazy. But is he going to be able to solve it? Some of the things he proposed, I can see, like, again, from being with economics background, they are not realistic. Some of this, like, how do you, for example, lower the rents for people? Many people think rent control. Well, in reality, though, the rents are high because the demand is high. People want to live there, right? They are ready to outbid each other, and that's what happens in the market. If somebody wants to pay $5,000 for an apartment, you can only get this apartment if you pay more. What happens if they set the price lower? They do actually have some rent-controlled apartments. How does it work? Well, there are problems immediately with that. One of them is nobody wants to move. I have a rent-controlled apartment, I'm never moving. Right? So the person who's already there is benefiting. What about you if you don't have one? Well, too bad. You may never get it. Right? So then the result is either it's even more expensive in the private market because private market only gets leftovers from that. So if there's not enough housing there, the prices, instead of being, say, $3,000 everywhere, you would get $2,000 rent control and $5,000 private market because there's not as many available. Or you would have literally nothing, live with your parents. There's just no availability. They may set the rent, but they're not going to give you the apartment because they don't have one. So that is problematic. Another thing, I heard landlords there, the ones who own these buildings with rent-controlled apartments, are not fixing them at all. They just let it go. Like, this much, you paying me this much money, I'm not going to do anything. So they are in really bad state. You like sometimes see those videos, people, everything is completely falling apart inside. If you do it at your own expense, well, it's a rental, right? So that can also be problematic. And we're running out of time? Yeah. Okay.